And welcome back to Inklings Behind the Scenes. This is J.S. Bray, and I got my buddy Francis on here again, and we're just gonna we're gonna talk about foot and mouth disease and some red flags.
Foot and mouth disease is a red flag if ever there was one. Yeah, the where that story comes from is a friend of mine's son. He has some kind of rash or whatever, nothing serious, but and evidently it's from sticking his fingers and his probably his foot too in his mouth. He's only
Yeah.
a year old, so what can you expect? You know, he's learning. And so another friend of ours said, well, yeah, I think his son has foot and mouth disease. And I said, that's an illness of cattle. He's a human being. He doesn't, he has a rash or something. He doesn't have foot and mouth.
Uh,
What's next? He's got, what do you call,
mange.
yeah, mad cow. Yeah, yeah, I said he has rabies. He has fleas. You know?
Oh goodness. Like kids with that, they get everything, man. I swear you almost have to, the reason why there's so many creepy folk tales out there, because kids are always getting into stuff out there. So you just have to terrify them so they're not putting that in their mouth. They're not going out to some stranger's house. It's just like, I think that's the origin of every creepy kid story is just,
I think so, yeah, because they usually like involve kids being eaten by something, some kind of creature,
yes,
like most fairy tales. And I guess like
yes.
that's just like, okay, you stick your foot in your mouth, like the creature's gonna come out from under your bed and make dinner out of you.
Oh goodness, yes. Are you a cinemaphile? Do you like to watch a lot of movies? Are you big into movies, or what's
I'm
your
not a
favorite?
huge movie guy. I mean, I actually probably watch more TV than I do.
Okay. We're in a golden age of television. I think sometimes serials are easier, less commitment. But there was a book I read and during my undergrad when I read called Save the Cat.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of this by Blake
Mm-hmm.
Snyder? It has a lot of really great things to it, but if you just want to read a super quick book that tells you about formula, what makes a good movie,
Mm-hmm.
Save the Cat is the idea that you're supposed to have empathy for the main character, right? You're supposed to care about him. And the one I like the most is that he talks about the horror genre is called a monster in the house. Okay. In order for a horror movie, because we're moving in October, right? For it to work, you have to be trapped. Okay? In order for it to be, you have to be trapped. And then what makes a really good horror film is that the monster is released because you commit some sin, and and it's acting out some sort of like, I guess, cosmic justice. So people have these ironic deaths. And if you watch all like the best scary movies, it usually has something along those lines of like, getting what you wish for, some sort of carnal vice that's being, served by justice. But I do think that there's something about like that kind of like when it comes to cinema and how we digest stories, like I like knowing the rules. I like that. I'm just curious if that's something that when you watch a show, do you sit there and kind of think about the formula when you're enjoying it, or are you just sort of like coast?
Not that much, honestly. It's really a time to kind of like allow my brain to like go on shutdown mode. And like the only time I ever really watch TV is right before bed, and it just kind of lets everything kind of power down. Because like
There you
other
go.
times I've been like reading a book about tech or whatever right before I go to bed, or answering emails or whatever. And the problem is my brain is simply too active to sleep at that. So
Yeah.
if I have like a kind of a shutdown sequence of, I don't know, an hour, I sleep extremely well.
Yeah.
And, that's a big priority in my life. And, is getting good sleep, because anything else I'm going to do pretty much grows out of
Oh, no, that's cool. I get that. I mean, I have trouble going to sleep, not just because I got kids, but also because like my mind is like, it has hard to power down. And then there's this sense of like when you're watching certain shows, like I love sitcoms. I love sitcoms. And my wife is a harder sell for a sitcom. Like she finds them like kind of like grossly formulaic, but I'm like, all sitcoms are formulaic,
that. It depends
and I
how good
like,
it is, Tom.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I can watch like at least the first couple seasons of Community over again. It's funny enough. It's got layers to it. Office, I can put that on and I could decompress and watch something silly. I can kind of zoom in. But yeah. Anyways, we're just the free flow from scaring children from eating their foot to how we still how that's evolved now. But ultimately, there are red flags in the story. There's always sort of landmarks, red flags of telling you dangers around the corner, dramas around the corner. And one of the topics I wanted to invite you, Francis, to kind of talk about today is red flags. What are your red flags, and what are kind of general red flags when it comes to angel investing, and then maybe for those folks who are wanting to be invested themselves? You know, what are things that they should kind of keep down the DL?
Yeah, I'll tell you probably about the biggest red flag in a tech startup that I can think of is a lack of people who know how to build tech. I meet
Oh,
companies like this all the time. If you don't have builder founders, it's a non-starter. Um,
mm,
Everybody wants to have a software company, but not everyone wants to learn how to build software, and that just simply won't work. So I like to see what Y Combinator, their rule is 2 to 4 founders, at least 50% technical. I think that's
okay.
as good a rule as any. I meet with companies all the time that they've got a bunch of like idea guys, which God only knows what these people do. Um, you know, 2 or 3 founders, none of them can code, not at all. I'm not saying you have to be a comp sci PhD, but ability to build product. And then they've got like 3 idea guys drawing who knows how much in salaries, probably contributing little or nothing in terms of value.
Oh
And
gosh.
meanwhile, I mean, yeah, that's the harsh truth. I mean, and meanwhile, they like all the development is done by a team in generally India is where you get a lot. Not that there aren't wonderful Indian
Yeah.
developers, but you need some tech talent in house. Why do you need that in house? So you can move fast. So you're not constantly, going back and forth with some team at some agency. I mean, it's going to take you when you face competition that has tech people in house and you're lost in emails back and forth with the agency, you're dead. They're
Yes.
going to accelerate right past you. It's also very expensive. You have to keep paying this agency and paying them and paying
Oh
them.
my goodness.
And
Yes.
if you start to run short of money, you won't be able to pay them anymore. No more new features, no more bug fixes, no more nothing. Whereas if you knew how to do it yourself, it's not going to cost you a penny. It's just your own knowledge and your own time. So that lack of an internal tech team isn't, I don't care what else the other facts are of the business. I don't care how fast they're growing. None of that makes any difference if they don't have
No.
builder founders.
That's a good one. Honestly, that's a really good one. I'm just talking about myself from my own background to kind of give a frame of reference. Like, as an animator and a software developer over the years, I picked up one because I love the other. And I'm the kind of person like if it's like I've always understood what a director does, and I'll tell you why. Because I love movies. So I feel like if you love movies, you want to learn everything about it. I am equally puzzled when there is startups and there is no technical co-founder, or when the co-founder themselves does not have the technical acumen to explain their tech stack or explain how they, to
Yeah,
me, I'm like, why do you think you're at a tech company? I mean, why don't you have a
yeah,
construction startup? Why don't you do something
yeah.
else?
Because
Because it doesn't,
construction's not cool
yeah,
and tech
yeah.
is.
I mean, but there's lots of money in it, and it's not
There
going
is,
anywhere.
certainly
Everywhere
is.
you
But
see it.
these
So
people are probably at least as attracted to prestige as they are to money. Um, and that's another red flag is if the founder isn't fluid in product. I'm not saying the founder has to be a developer. I mean, I think that's often great if the CEO is a developer, but I'm not saying that they necessarily have to be, but they need to be fluent in product. Like if I've had instances where I asked the CEO just to give me a quick demo and they like don't even know how to do it. Like they don't even know how to log into the product or go through a basic workflow. And I'm just like, okay, so you look at like PowerPoints and spreadsheets all day, so you're not in the product. You don't know what's actually going on in this business. Meanwhile, like
yeah,
we're talking huge entrepreneurs like Raul Vora at Superhuman or Brian Chesky at Airbnb. They know every inch of those products. They know those products probably better than anyone who uses them. Um, I can bet you
that's
any money
yeah.
that Brian Chesky knows more about Airbnb's platform than I do, even though I've booked many Airbnbs. So that is what we're looking for. And everybody else, that's in the no thanks bucket.
I like that. I like that. That's a very hard, like, that's a skills right there. Do you have the skills to do this? I mean, because there's a lot of people, I mean, I've often find the term, serial entrepreneur. I kind of find that as a red flag, but that's from my experience. So serial entrepreneur means They have a lot of ideas, maybe not a lot of success. And so, these are just labels. Labels can mean a lot of things to people. Some people I would just never identify as a serial entrepreneur because of all the negative connotations I've had in my life. For somebody who's always coming up with a new idea, I'm like, what's the follow through on that? Um, but what, is there another like big red flag you'd say, get away, run for the hills?
Oh yeah, I've got lots of them.
Yes.
If a founder seems like focused on an early exit or like myopically focused on pure money making, I'm not a saint. I want to make money too. I understand you need money to live. I get that. But if
Yeah.
your primary or sole motivation is money, you go get a job at Facebook for 400K. You don't, or even if you found a company, you probably sell it quick for a few million. You pocket a couple mil yourself, maybe a lucrative job offer, and that's that. That works okay for the founder. That doesn't do a darn thing for me or other investors. If you're getting just 1x on your money or even 5 or 10x, it doesn't get you to first base. We're here for the 100x, the 1000x. And
Yeah.
if it's all about, I just want to make some money, that person is never going to get you there because it's too hard and it takes too long. They're just sell out for some modest sum.
That tracks. I mean, and to kind of relate that to film and stuff like that, it's like in 2016, I fired my agent. And so I fired my agent. He had optioned us a deal for this kids show project I was working on. And I was very excited about this. Is, like, okay, cool. But he was a junior agent. And so he used his opportunity oh, look, I sold this because I had some talent attached to it. Actually, I won't tell you the whole project here on screen, but like I had John DiMaggio, the voice of Bender, on it, and some other cool actors, stuff like that. And so he used that. He optioned it for us, and like, oh great, excited for that. But he used that as leverage to get a promotion at his job, and then he shelved our deal. And so I'm like, there's no skin in the game. So if a person has, like you said, just that little, let's make a little bit of money now, they don't have the skin in the game. They don't have the vision for what you're trying to do. So I
Yeah,
can totally agree with that. Yeah.
vision really matters. I mean, there's easier and much surer ways to make money than starting a tech startup. The likely amount that you will make from that is basically zero. If you're lucky, you'll maybe pull a modest salary for a couple of years, and you'll work so many hours that you could probably make more money working on an
Oh,
hourly basis. That's the likely outcome for most startups. So unless it's something you really just have to create in the world or you'll bust, it's just not really for you.
yeah. That's a very similar kind of mindset that a lot of creatives have in like the film and animation industry. And you can make good money. You can work. There's like two ways. You can work with the big brands, or you can try to start your own. There are costs to both. Like trying to start your own is more difficult because you don't have the supply chain. So like I could work on the back end for some Apple project. And I mentioned this on the podcast. I worked on that kid series, Yo Gabba Gabba, with a buddy of mine. And now I didn't create that show. I just helped them out. Right. But to create your own intellectual property, getting it all that, like that's a lot of work. And so when you're thinking about trying to build technology to revolution, what's the point? You're not trying to make, brand X products. You're trying to make revolutionary products and content that people that they're addicted to and that changes their life in a positive way. Yeah. You got to be willing to go all the way. So that's good. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. Another one for me is kind of a wonky one, not being incorporated properly. You see this a lot. A tech startup, it needs to be a Delaware C corporation. There are no other possibilities that are viable.
Okay.
Several different reasons. One, they can do a lot of things that tech startups need to do and that other corporate forms can't do. Like say, for example, issuing multiple classes of shares. That's important. Issuing stock options or RSUs to employees to incentivize them. That's important. It's something a Delaware C Corp can do. It's something that, like, say, an LLC, for example, that's not possible. There's no multiple share
Yeah, that's
classes.
true. Yeah.
And also, like, there's a predictable body of case law in Delaware. So that's, it's a wonky thing, but it's also an easy thing to get right. I mean, there's
Yeah.
numerous services that can do this for you very cheaply. So, and if you incorporate it as something else earlier, that's fine. You can convert it with a little. It's just a question of time and legal fees. But if you're looking to raise venture capital in the United States, at least, you've got to get this dialed in, because no matter how good you are otherwise, that's going to be a block.
That's a legitimate. I mean, like when I think about that, because I've had my business license for a really long time, and I've had it, in different states. My company is an LLC based in Tennessee, and for the reasons that I like to work locally as much as possible, but I hire people other places. And I have had a Delaware C corp years ago on a startup, and that was kind of like that was the preferred thing. Um, but like for an example, and I'll just say this for folks listening. So I have someone who's reached out. They're an investor. They want to invest in a project that I'm working on. And what they suggest is that we take that intellectual property and remove it from my LLC. So basically buy it out and then put that in a separate C corp. So it's like, it's not a really that hard of a lift. I think
No,
if you have a really great
money,
idea. Yeah.
It's legal fees and time, and for many kinds of businesses, like, say your animation business, or say I wanted to start a lawn mowing business, LLC would be just fine. It's specifically a tech startup that's looking to raise venture capital. That's when you need the Delaware C corp.
The Delaware C corp.
Don't go by me. Talk to lawyers, whatnot. They can advise you better than I can. But I do know that much, that it's a really important thing, and fortunately, it's a pretty easy thing to get.
Oh gosh. I mean, you can go on Zen Business and have that done in 10 minutes,
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
or
no
LegalZoom. These are so simple, right?
fair
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. And it's actually, they streamlined it so much that like my brother-in-law, who's a lawyer, he doesn't even bother with that. He just does like estate planning and other types of contract law, like stuff that, like they haven't figured out.
You stopped.
Oh, oh, sorry. Did my internet cut out?
No, you're good now.
Okay. So yeah, like, I mean, they're really easy things to do. It's very easy to do. All right. So, okay. So what's the wildest red flag that you saw, but you kind of like, but you just kind of push through,
Well, like, and then I actually made the investment.
Yeah. You're like, say something like, man, oh, that was a red flag. I didn't see it all along the whole time, but I wanted this no matter what. Like, have you, are you pretty nifty for safety, or did you just push on through because you really wanted to?
Well, I mean, there's one mistake that I used to make and make no longer, which is investing without an actual round going on in the company. Sometimes, like, you see a company, you're like, okay, there's not like an actual round happening. They're not raising, I don't know, 2 million with a lead, putting in 1 million, blah, blah, blah. It's just me and putting in a little check. Like, the company could look and even be great, but my experience with that is it is not successful, because, like, compare that to a company that's taking down a couple $1 million, that can get them to the next level. A check for a few thousand is not going to do that. So investing between rounds, just because I love the company, love the founder, I mean, it really doesn't make sense. I only made, I think, 3 investments like that out of like 31 or 32, and I'm not going to be doing it again, because it has not worked. It was an experiment. I knew it was an experiment. I figured, let's try this. It's a somewhat different model than what I have been doing or what most people are doing. It just might work. Well, it doesn't. So
yeah,
on to the next thing.
That's good to know. I mean, I like to know that you open with your mistakes. I mean, I make mistakes all the time. And I think it's good to know that, because sometimes I get a little precious about it. I think, well, no, I can just raise this and raise that, and I can move this project in this way. And so for just context, in animation, and this is like a contentious thing, but I say it because like I like a little bit of controversy. Is it your project union or is it non-union? There's really no middle ground. So people want to go union because of all this, their opinions about it, or non-union. I'm going to say it now for those folks who are listening. I don't like the union. I don't like it for a lot of reasons. My mom was a model and actress. I saw how that worked. It ultimately, on the animation side, hardly does it serve them. Okay. Cause you're always going from gig to gig. All these big studios that go under, and I'm going way back. One of the most beautiful films was Life of Pi, and Ang Lee, beautiful film. and they went under. And I knew specific animators that they were owed like the size of a mid sedan kind of amount of money, and they never got paid. And there was union, but Mo only one about unions. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
if
But
they
they're
were
there to
paying them,
collect a check for the dues, though. I'm sure. You'll hear
oh
from
well,
them.
and so like, and I know, and that's where like, I know, I think that there are obviously positive things behind unions, but when I see like these mistakes, I I'll say this like, and then we'll get into more red flags. Unions, they'll take, if you want one voice actor, right, on a project, that is possibly maybe 10% of your project, like maybe even 5% of the actual work that goes into a film. Because you have backgrounds, you have other characters, you have all these layers of stuff, right? One person. Because you hire a union actor, you have to give them 30% of gross profits.
That's rough.
Yeah. That's a massive administrative cut
Yeah.
just to have a union actor.
From one person.
Yeah, one person. So you basically have to have your show be a hit for multiple seasons to make payroll.
Yeah.
Um, and so, anyways, like I do budgeting much different than most other filmmakers. I actually break it into a percentages. So however much budget we have, we all get the same percentage per the hat that you wear. And so, and that's what you get paid. Um, so some people don't like it, but I'm like, hey, like, I don't like it either, but I'm like, it's hard to get paid, when each project is a new investment. So, but I think that's something you should consider. Like, what are the risks of it? And making mistakes is part of the thing. I do appreciate you, Francis, you sharing that, being precious about somebody that you like and throwing money at it. Okay. Shifting a little bit, if you can recall, because I know that you said you've only done 30, which is still a ton. What is like the biggest return, or have you had any wins yet that you feel like, oh my goodness, this is like,
Well,
yeah.
none of them exited yet, except like a couple of small acqui-hires. I've been at this about 3.5 years, so I'm
Hmm.
expecting that to take 10 or 12 years to get to like a big exit, which is pretty typical from like the seed or pre-seed stage at which I invest. The most successful so far, we actually talked about a little bit last time, Rilla, and last I heard,
Yes.
like 17 million ARR. The founder put it out publicly on LinkedIn, so I'm not speaking out of school or whatever. I think it's
Yeah.
water under the bridge now, so I guess it doesn't matter, but like, I think they were at a maybe 500,000 ARR a year when I invested about 2 years ago in their pre-seed. Um, their first like real full round that they did. So they've grown by a factor of something like 34 in like sub 2 years, which,
Wow.
it's as far as anyone knows, as far as the founder or anybody else can tell, it's one of the fastest growing startups of all time at this stage.
That's awesome. I mean,
So
that's what you're looking for, right? Like a big
it
win.
is, and it vastly overperformed even my wildest dreams, frankly. Hopefully it keeps going. I mean, no signs of slowing down over there. They are intense. They're in person 6 days a week in their office in Long Island City, Queens. They only
Wow.
take off Sunday. So they're working bare minimum 20% more than most other companies. And
That,
you
that,
can
that makes a big
see the
difference.
results. Yeah, yeah, you can see it. You can see it in the results.
Wow. Hey, Francis, I just have to go grab my son real quick, and I'll
Yeah.
be right back. He's having a little fussy time, but so and as we're doing that, I'll load the next question. So what is what is the oddest? I guess we talked about weird red flags, but maybe think of another red flag. I'm gonna grab my little guy. Sorry about that, buddy. So sorry.
No
He was.
worries. Hey, little buddy,
This is
how's it going? Oh,
this
he's
is
so tiny.
yeah. He's 5 months old. This is Eli. Hey, how
We
you
have a
doing,
surprise
sweetheart?
guest. Hi, Eli. How you doing?
I think he was just his baba wants a little about. Sorry about that.
So cute. No, it's fun to have a surprise guest.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of a strange red flag, a while back, I met a company that we're talking an early stage company with over $700,000 in debt on it. It would be very unusual to see any debt at all in an early stage startup like this. This one, the founder had gone into debt I mean, the better part of $1 million. And what did it relate right back to? The very first red flag that we talked about, lack of an in-house technical team. The founder had to keep paying and paying and paying, developers, whatnot, and there was no ability to build in-house. And this is where you wind up, where that founder may be facing, for all I know, personal bankruptcy over this. And you might feel sorry for that person. You might say, hey, I hope it works out for them, but you'd be a fool to put money into it, because it's our job to turn $1 into two, and it's not our job to give money to somebody just because they seem nice, or this is business. This is not a charity.
That's true. It's not a charity. That reminds me of an old joke about the guy who, you've probably heard this one, but there's a guy, he walks into the outhouse and he sees someone throwing $20 bills in there. And he says, why are you doing that? Well, there's no way I'm going in there for a nickel. So it's like,
yeah. And it's just like, I don't understand how this founder allowed themselves to get into this situation. It's a real pretty catastrophic error in judgment. But hey, it sounds kind of harsh, but in reality, this is their error, not mine. Like, I don't want to be involved in this. This person's an adult. They made their decision. And besides, if I give them $5,000, it's not going to change anything anyway.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot.
That'll last them a week or something.
Let's talk about that. Like you mentioned check size. And so like when you're doing fundraising, like on the creative side, fundraising is quite unique. There's sort of the crowdfunding, there's the bootstraps, there's co-production deals where somebody comes along. But each way it slices differently, but you do eventually get like your first check. And so can you tell like a little bit of folks listening, what is a first check? Like, what do you mean by that? Like,
well, I'll make a first investment in a company, and that's typically $5,000. It's pretty much always $5,000. And then if the company does really well, I'm going to try to put more money into it. I'm going to try to put maybe $25,000 in the next round, say if they do a Series A or whatever. And that isn't for everyone. That's only for the top performers, because I'm trying to get where that represents a bigger slice of my portfolio, and the ones that aren't making it represent a smaller slice. Double down on success, and those that aren't making it, you can't throw good money after bad. That's just foolish. No. And people have lost fortunes at venture capital, just bridging companies over and over and over. Not just individuals, big funds have done this, and it's a giant mistake. You don't double down on failure, you double down on success.
That's totally true. I mean, it's honestly, this is probably why you and I, we get chats about political opinions that I hardly do I find people who are on the same page as me, as you. And so I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice. Cause I do think that sometimes it becomes like a corporate bailout, because you're doing a bad thing. You didn't budget this right. I mean, out here in the South, who's a big fan out here is like Dave Ramsey, sort of a financial celebrity. And there's a lot of sort of like wisdom to just paying attention to every dollar you got. And not spending excessively. Sometimes things about American culture is that it is a debt society, right? We're all into debt for school or everything. We put everything on a credit card, but this is your money, and you want somebody who values their money. I believe, and one of my core values is enterprise, and that it's not just the race. Sorry, it's not just the prize, but it's also the race. Not burning through people or resources unnecessarily, because you don't know how long the race is going to be. You don't know. So I like that.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to like, these are experiments, and it's kind of like drug trials, for example, which of course are also funded by venture capital. You don't put more money into the drug candidate that didn't perform right in the human trials. You put more money in the one that's helping with the disease, not the one that's not doing anything or even making it. It's all experiments, and you double down on successful ones, and you cut off the unsuccessful ones. And that's a painful process, but it's necessary. There's no other way.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, there is a success, and you want to reward success. And I also think that like knowing what your strategy is, sometimes the strategy is kind of crazy. So like, when you're investing, like I found that like over the years, I've done a lot of client work. We're working with client, and then I realized that there's this realm of sponsorship. So like you do like you can get people to sponsor your projects. It's kind of like getting, non-equity diluting free money. I mean, and I've done enough and like got grants stuff like that. But I think like the creative thing is still looking at all money like you've earned it and you need to be responsible with it. I think that even if it's quote unquote free money, Uncle Sam still can come after it. I like that. So, okay. So, and this idea that you have, this experiment where you give like the $5,000 first check and then maybe 25K for your second for the successful check. I mean, how did you come up with this idea?
Well, I learned it from Jason Calacanis' book Angel and also his very good podcast This Week in Startups. If you have any interest at all in investing, definitely check both of those out. Those are the first places to go. And he explained the concept of bet sizing and bankroll. Probably the biggest mistake that new angels make, he gave a great example, is let's say you've got $500,000 dedicated to invest in startups, just as an example. You meet a founder you really like, you give them 250K, and then a year later they come back to you and say, oh, the product's almost about to launch, which is another red flag. It's not launched yet. You don't want to invest pre-launch.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
right about to launch, but we do need another 150K to get there. So you give them another 150K. Now you're up to 400. 6 months later, they come back to you and say, I'm sorry, the money's gone, but we're so close to launching. Like any day now, it's going to be really big. You want to save this 400K that you put in. So you give them the last 100. Now your whole $500,000 bankroll for investing in startups is gone, and I can bet you a dollar to a dime that thing is going to zero. Now you could say to yourself, like, hey, I already lost 400,000. I'm already down 80%. Like, what does it even matter? All money has value. If you were to find a great investment out of that remaining 100,000, you could wind up millions. But
Yeah.
so it's a problem to just continue doubling down on the same company and not have that diversification. There's not that many startups that make it. If you're lucky, maybe one in every 30 investments or maybe one in every 50 from seed stage will actually become a unicorn and really make you money. You need to be able to make enough bets to actually hit one. If you make 2 or 3 bets, whatever, even if you're very good at this, you probably won't hit a unicorn. Like I could give Jason or Bill Gurley or whatever only 2 or 3 investments. Even they probably couldn't hit a unicorn with that view. But they're smart enough to know I need to make more than that. And then that's why your bets need to be sized appropriately. That way you can get that diversification. And making too big of bets on too few companies is a mistake that so many angels make. And of course, the founders will encourage you to do it. They would prefer a larger check than a smaller one in most cases.
Of course they would. Yeah, that makes sense.
I generally prefer more money than less.
Yeah, I mean, there's a comfortability you get. I think that, I mean, of all things, we have bills that we need to get done, right? There's like, we say burn rate for companies, but when I think about startups, I don't think about burn rate. I think about rent. Like, let's be like it's rent and food. Can you pay for rent and food? If you haven't set that aside, when I first started my company in 2011, I made sure that I had about 8 months runway before I quit my other job and said no to other projects and started doing it full time. And there has been some real lean times. I've had definitely some real lean times, and you kind of weather that. And one of the things that you have with just being older is the experience to know like what you do. Like maybe it's a month that you're eating ramen, but knowing how people live their life, if they're frugal on an everyday, I think does give you kind of an insight. Do you ever get kind of into the weeds with them, saying, "Hey, man, I'd love to invest with you, but I'm going to make sure that you aren't like a Starbucks a day kind of guy, or that you ever
I'm
get
not
kind
going
of
to get into that level of detail with them. I'm trusting them to do the adult thing and have the company live within their means. And as regards their personal finances, assuming I've picked the founder correctly, they're going to have that control. And if I haven't, then that's on me because that's my job. It's not their fault. It's my fault. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into somebody's personal life or how they spend their money on the personal level. That's just not really my remit. my job is to choose companies and founders that will handle resources wisely.
Sure.
And so let's say if I see, okay, the company is burning $20,000 a month, but last month they actually increased their revenue by 40,000 in a single month. I'd be like, okay, we don't need to dig into Starbucks habits. This company is clearly capital efficient. They have what's called a burn multiple of 0.5, which is ridiculously low. And they're handling money in an intelligent way. So that's how I would assess that.
Sure. I've had a couple experience with startups. Like that really kind of blew my mind. I was hired years ago, I was a consultant, but it was it was a full-time thing, but, they had themselves some money, and it was crazy. They had a masseuse, they had catered lunches, and they had the whole shebang, right? And these folks, I remember they flew me out there. I was from where I was at. They flew me to Boston, and they wanted me to build an entire LMS for them, and I was excited about the product. But I realized that even though these people were super knowledgeable about technology, they didn't understand the product. They didn't understand me. I was a consumer of the product. So I could tell you, I won't say it here on screen, but I can tell you, I knew the ins and out of this tool, and they didn't know what they were doing. And so that's why they hired me to build them an entire LMS. And I was like, this is such a great tool. But why are you never in the office? And why are you have catered lunches? And why are you spending all this money? To me, why do you need somebody here to massage you on payroll? This is ridiculous.
People like that are publishers. They want to pretend to be an entrepreneur, but they don't want to do the work. And as investors, we have to avoid those people like the plague. Those people will kill your returns and waste your money on nonsense.
Yeah. I could not believe them. And I've been to places where they boast about bacon, they boast about cold brew on tap, kombucha on tap, beer on tap, all these stupid things. And I'm like, well, do you no?
It's not a resort,
Yeah. They have a little meditation room and a lactation room and all these weird little things. And I'm not saying you can't have certain balance in your life, but I'm just thinking some of these things are just superfluous. You're trying to change the world.
If you want luxury, then go work for Google. Startups aren't for you.
Yeah. That's right. A startup it takes more guts. It takes more guts.
Go hang out on the roof and get some sun at Google, because this is not where you belong at that point, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, Francis, I thank you so much for your time. I know that we're always chatting long, and I just wanted to ask you one last question, one more last little red flag if you got one you want to talk, and then we can connect maybe some other time. So.
Well, yeah, that'd be great. A really common red flag is, a company trying to raise money. We alluded to this earlier, but trying to raise money when they don't have a product and they don't have a single paying customer. It's at that point you're kind of putting the cart before the horse. And so many angels make the mistake of, that example I gave before. They've got the $500,000 bankroll and they give it all to one company, and that company doesn't even have a product released. They say roughly 90% of companies that, if not more than 90%, who don't have a product, they never will release a product. They'll constantly, I can't tell you how many times I have heard, oh, we're right about to launch, blah, blah. And it's just okay, cool. They were right about to launch for a year or two or whatever. It's just come on, So you're going to take an awful lot of zeros out of your portfolio if you only invest in stuff that's launched and has some paying customers. I don't even meet founders that don't have a launch product without a couple paying customers, because there's no point. We're having meetings to have meetings at that point. What are we even going to discuss? There's nothing to talk about. There's no product. There's no customers. I guess we can talk about their vision, but everybody has ideas. If I met with every single person that had an idea, I would never sleep. That's a good point to begin meeting founders, is when they've got a couple paying customers, they've got a product in market, and investing before that. I mean, I'll let Y Combinator do it because they're experts, they're really smart, and they're getting in at a $1.7 million valuation, which certainly helps.
Sure.
That's not a bet for me.
Yeah, Y Combinator definitely has that sort of the Midas touch for a lot of companies. And I would say as a person, I applied for Y Combinator. I was excited, why not? Now I have my animation company. what I applied for specifically does not directly relate to my animation company. And I'm a glutton for punishment. I always want to see the process. I want to see, like, you can't see the process sometimes from the outside. You kind of want to get in there. And I've been accepted into multiple accelerators just to learn what that process is like, just to see what it's like. Because I'm always learning. I want to learn something new. And so I think that's smart. Think about people who have a product. There's a lot. I can't tell you how many people come to me and like, oh, I got a kid show idea. I'm like, well, that's great. Now go get $20,000 and put 10,000 hours in this. And don't, that's great. You have an idea. I mean, not to belittle ideas, but it is so much work to, like, if you don't have anything to show for it, it's just words, man. It's just words.
Yeah, exactly. And, that might be a wonderful bet for a great program like, YC or other Techstars, other accelerators, but that just doesn't make sense for me. And it's not going to make sense for most angels.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's where you have to always have, like, you have to have some wisdom about you and what you want to put your bet. Because other than that, it's you're right. It's charity. And there are a lot of really great charities out there.
Yeah, by all means, give to the Salvation Army or whatever if you want to do charity. Yeah. They feed hungry people who need the money a whole lot worse than most startup founders do. So if you want to do charity, do it like that.
Yeah, I like actually, one of the things I was going to say I always liked about Salvation Army is that it's a church, right? It's got this religious aspect to it, but also it's got this, like, kind of entrepreneur aspect too, where they have a store, they have, like, there's outreach and there's actual place for them to make commerce. And I'm sure there's some sort of, like, issue about that, but like, years ago, a buddy of mine, he's a pastor, and he wanted to start a nonprofit, like, brewery. And I thought, what a cool idea. And now, not everyone has the same conviction about alcohol, but I thought the idea was they would open a pub that's nonprofit, but then they would still allow churches to do nonprofit stuff there, and they'd have a place for, family stuff. And I thought, I always like it when somebody has a vision, like a cause, and they also can think on their feet with money. Because sometimes, the mission-driven people don't have any idea about money.
Yeah, and the really great people in nonprofits are, in another life, they probably could have been very successful startup founders and they would have made a whole lot more money, but they wouldn't be accomplishing the mission that they care about.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, thank you so much again, Francis. I just want to, like, before you go, do you want to plug your blog one more time? I mean, I always drop it in this episode.
It's very easy to remember. Tremendous.blog. Every weekday I write about tech, business, whatnot. It's not too long. About 500 words is typical. It's not going to take you all day.
All right.
And, so yeah, check that out. There's an archive of, if you get into it, there's an archive of over 1,000 posts on there. So you can knock yourself. And then there's
I read your one today. Yeah, it's a great one. I like your blog. That's how we met. I started reading your blog and I was digging it, and then we reached out on social media, and it was just like one step at a time. And you're a cool guy. You're accessible, which is actually, that makes it even more. And then you share how you feel about stuff too. So I think that's another thing, is have a point of view. I like that. A lot of people are kind of afraid to have a point of view, and you have a clear point of view in your blog. But
I don't work for anybody else anymore, so I can finally say what I want.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Francis. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I hope you all have a blessed day.
Thank you.